There are few issues that are more important to parents than the education of their children. This film is about the UK's Jesuit schools, schools that cover the whole spectrum, both state and independent, primary and secondary, day and boarding, and boys only to co-educational. What unites Jesuit schools is the vision of one man, Saint Ignatius.
Why on earth has he created this society which is so successful all the way around the world, and why are there over 2,000 schools across the world that are Jesuit schools, and why is it something that's lasted all this time? There must be something about it, I thought to myself.
It's built into everything from what they write on their jotter page every day to the way they treat each other. It's just a way of being.
It's impossible to get out of my head AMDG, LDS, but the beginning and end of each piece of work that you would do.
This means basically for the greater glory of God.
We say to the boys here to do their very best in everything they do. Develop your talents to the full, so that when you come to make a difference, and that opportunity I hope will come to you in your life, you'll make the biggest difference you can make.
This is AMDG. That's something that we include in our title.
Do you know what that means?
I forgot. for the greater glory of God.
Oh, well done.
I knew the Jesuits were in order, and I knew that they had set up many schools in England and many other European countries and around the world. So I knew they had a lot of influence, and I knew how they taught was to make you think, as not just learn by parroting back.
It's all about not just competing and trying to do the best you can academically. It's about doing the best you can for the community, helping each other.
Definitely.
We begin our story here at St John's Beaumont in Berkshire. It's one of the Jesuits' 11 UK schools and the oldest purpose-built prep school in the country.
So what are we taught that the Jesuits believe? What do we keep at the centre of our lives?
To be a man for others.
A man for others. Other things we know about.
That we should help everyone.
We should help people.
To keep Christ at the centre of our lives.
Okay, to keep Christ at the centre of our lives. Good.
Respect people.
Have respect.
We should follow God and Jesus.
Okay, follow the example of God. Follow Jesus' example.
Be generous.
Be generous.
Help people.
Help people. Good.
Reflect.
Reflect.
Try hard all the time.
Okay, effort in things we do things properly. Good, good. Carrying on from the themes that we've been exploring, on these pieces of paper, I'd like you to write down those words that we've been discussing. So we need to think about the imagery, we need to think about all the words that encapsulate being part of a Jesuit community. You don't need to be a Catholic to come to the school, but you have to buy into our ethos to come to this school. So that means engaging in worship with us, engaging in the Mass with us, engaging in the idea of what Jesuit education stands for, that to be in a Jesuit school we will put your learning into context, and more importantly than that, we will make sure that you go out into the world and you make a difference.
So was it something that St Ignatius sort of set out to do from the beginning, education? Was it always on the agenda?
Not at all. At first, Ignatius wanted the first Jesuits to be very flexible, to be able to go where the need was greatest. But what they found was one of the great needs was in education, was setting up schools. And so in 1548, the town council at Messina in Sicily asked the Jesuits to begin a school, and we began a school, and that was how we got into education. And very quickly, schools then popped up in France and Spain and Italy and all places all across Europe.
There's not just schools though, is it? Because it's colleges, universities.
Yes, we are involved in all levels of education, right from preschool, right the way through primary and secondary school to universities and beyond, yes.
The Society of Jesus, or Jesuits, is a religious order within the Catholic Church, founded by St. Ignatius of Loyola in 1540. With an emphasis on strong intellectual formation, former pupils are encouraged to excel in whatever field they choose to pursue. Here in Scotland, I catch up with the Jesuit-educated Frank Dunn, President of the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons. His academic career includes contributions to hundreds of medical publications.
We're very lucky in the medical profession because in other professions you have to look out for doing good, but within your daily activity, if you practice properly to a high level as a doctor, you're doing good every day, you're helping your patients, you enter into their life and you support them.
Frank attended St Aloysius College in the centre of Glasgow. It's a Jesuit mixed independent day school where from an early age pupils are encouraged to think for themselves. So what are some of the key characteristics of Jesuit education then?
I think we would say that there are 5. The first is intellectual formation. I think the second is having a broad curriculum and lots of extracurricular activities so that pupils can find something that they do well in and that is them. I think it's also about that religious dimension where we feed the spirit and we encourage our youngsters to be generous in the way they serve others, men and women for others. I think it's about really good pastoral care, so that especially when youngsters are in trouble, that we support them and we allow them to flourish and to grow. And I think lastly it's about having broad horizons, that they feel that they belong to a global community and don't just always look inwardly.
You're presented with these principles by the school, but you have to decide whether that's for you or not. You're not just doing it because you're a Catholic.
I think there's kind of 2 things that come from the education. I think there's the idea of pursuing excellence and being the very best you can be, and I think that a lot of our pupils are really highly motivated and very aspirational to do well in whatever field they're going into. But I also think, and I would say this from the very earliest years up, there's an emphasis on helping others and looking at how you can use your talents for other people. And I think our students are really, really interested and kind of motivated by that.
If we don't give them that feeling of a moral conscience in society, then what we're doing is failing in a way. It's not just about getting them into university.
Not to say that we are always better or anything like that than other schools, but we have our own particular ethos, our own way of operating, our own priorities, and I'd like to think that much of that is based on the idea that we're a very reflective community in the tradition of St Ignatius.
It is this religious dimension that permeates through all Jesuit schools, where there is an emphasis on prayer and reflection, but combined with an unflinching call to action. Many of the religious activities pupils may take part in emanate from St. Ignatius himself and his spiritual exercises. One such exercise is the daily examen, taking time out to review the events of the day, finding examples of where God has been at work.
Ignatius urges us to do the examen on a daily basis, with the idea that if we look back over our experience and reflect on it, we gradually become more aware of God's presence, but we also become more aware of the direction that God is calling us.
So Adrian, I have with me St. Ignatius's spiritual exercises. Now, in what way is something like this today relevant to the modern school and the modern school pupil?
Well, these are the notes that Ignatius began writing in 1522, and these were his reflections on what it meant to be a human being and what it meant to have a relationship with God. And so here you find principles and exercises, thoughts and prayers, and these are very much Ignatius's vision for somebody living a good human life. And so this is the vision that still underpins Jesuit ministries today, and this is the vision that lies behind what we do today in Jesuit schools and have done for the last 450 years.
So still very relevant.
Very much very relevant. You will recognise phrases and ideas from here in the way teachers and students and parents talk about education in a Jesuit school today.
Some of the things that we are trying to do with them don't easily square up with the normal consciousness of a child's life. So, for example, to get them to sit down and reflect is not something that children will do easily. Children live in the moment, and when one moment is over, they want to be on to the next thing. And I think that's a sort of life skill that we can cultivate at a very young age, and gradually as they get older. And I think you have to think of Jesuit education as a journey through the whole school. They learn to reflect, and they learn the power of reflection, and they learn, to use a Jesuit word, how to discern.
At Mount St Mary's College in Derbyshire and its prep school Balborough Hall, here too time is set aside for prayer and reflection, and today the senior pupils are on retreat.
It's a day of almost rest, but also a day of reflection. So you learn all about helping people, God, you say some prayers, you play some games to bring the year closer. So basically after a full year of hard work and exams, and you all go a part of it, then retreat just brings everyone back together.
Do you think it's worthwhile?
Yeah, definitely. Very important part of the Mount. We have one every year, and they're essential to just get the spirit back up in the year. And yeah, that is Mount Spirit.
The ethos of the school being Jesuit, the spirit of the school being Ignatian, is all the more palpable for them now with fewer Jesuits around, because we have made much more of a conscious effort to be faithful to the principles that Ignatius and the Jesuits would have started off with. And that's about the development of the whole person, the cura personalis in terms of pastoral care within a school, the excellence that we want the gifts and talents of our children to achieve, not for their own sake, but to put to the service of other people.
Here, I've really learnt more about myself as a person and about other people, because I've learned that God's always there for me and He's always looking over me. Like yesterday, we had a retreat and these people came in and they were saying, like, where is God in your life? And for me, it's at school.
It's things like the retreats we're operating, it's things like the work with the disadvantaged, disabled, it's things like the preachers we get in and speakers, it's the support we give just to individuals, the pastoral care. You can say that the children must, by the time they've gone through their schooling here, know that they're part of this bigger family, which you hope they will recognise beyond their time here.
Nottingham Crown Court has recently been the scene of some challenging criminal trials. Sarah Knight is a barrister specialising in these particularly tough cases. She's been at the bar for some 17 years and was interested in law since her school days at Stonyhurst College in Lancashire.
I've noticed over the years a lot of the cases I tend to get tend to be if I prosecute with children or with vulnerable people. And equally, if I defend, I'm often instructed to look after folk who've not been in the system before. And I think that's partially because the approach I have is to go through in detail and with care every step. And I think that is part and parcel of what I remind myself each time, is being compassionate, trying my best to do something for someone else. There's a fundamental support that Stonyhurst brings to each of us who've been through it. It is something that isn't just a schooling, it's something that is part and parcel of how we apply ourselves in the world today. And I'm not just saying that because those are the words that I think people might expect me to use. For me, the values I gained there have provided me with the tenacity, with the drive, with the fervour to do what I do.
Now, Adrian, I know that this was something that you wanted to take me through. What is this then, this book?
Well, this is the original Jesuit plan of studies for its schools. Ignatius's own experience of education was very piecemeal and chaotic. And so when Jesuit schools were begun, he insisted that we thought through how you run a good school. And a committee of 6 Jesuits from different countries, different schools was set up, and they met over a very long period of time. And they came up with this plan of studies, and this was finally published in 1599. And it really sets out how you organize a school so that people learn well and that people learn how to live well.
And how relevant are the facts within this today? You know, is it old-fashioned or is it relevant?
Many of the things in here are still as relevant today as they were when they were written. We have an updated version of this that we use in the schools today. But this, I suppose, captures that spirit of Jesuit education, captures that idea that you organize schools in such a way that people can be looked after, can learn, can thrive, and then can go from school and do something worthwhile in the world.
My time at Stonyhurst wasn't just academic. At Stonyhurst, I was involved with drama. I was involved in the Highline Handicapped Children's Trust, the Debating Society, helping charity fundraising, doing my first half marathon. All sorts of things I'd never done before. And when you put those into the melting pot of me, they have made me the person that I am today.
I think to begin with, the idea is to allow the children to know Christ and to know God and to know his love for them. And we use, obviously, the life of St. Ignatius as an absolutely brilliant model for doing that. You can see that some of the things they've learned here, they're taking into their business life, they've taken to university, they've taken into their relationships with others, that they become people who care about the world. They're actively participating in the missionary activity of the church. They're taking part in welfare activities. They're looking at making sure that the world becomes a better place in a more solid and concrete way, not just in theory.
Tony Sheen works for CAFOD, the Catholic Aid Charity, though he's not always been in the charitable sector. After leaving St. Ignatius College in Enfield, he headed for the city.
I left school and went into banking, but over the years, as well as sort of growing in seniority within the bank, I also grew in my knowledge of poverty and injustice, and maybe this is a connection to my Jesuit education, was to look at asking questions why. And in 2005, around the time of Make Poverty History, when there was a big campaign for cancellation of debt, I decided that my time in the city was going to come to an end, and applied to work for CAFOD as role of diocesan manager and was successful. That'd be another one. When I was in the bank, I was selling systems and packages that were for the bank. What I'm talking about now is something that is dear, dear, dear to my heart. It's part of my faith, my yearning for justice, and it's a visible opportunity, practical for me to put my faith into action in working for justice.
Tony's school, St. Ignatius Enfield, is in North London. It provides a Jesuit education for boys aged 11 to 18. It can boast the Beatles producer George Martin and Alfred Hitchcock as former pupils.
We're heading down the corridor here to the art exhibition, which is on today, and their parents are coming in this evening to see the fruit of their labours. So
art's quite important here.
it is important. I think all the creative arts, music, because it's an expression of their own personal identity as well as their own talents. And I think that one of the things we've really pushed with our boys is to make sure they be the very best they can be and not have anything to do with any mediocrity or it was okay. We really pushed them. We couldn't have a look at some of them. You alright, lads? Have you been putting the artwork out? Have you been looking at it?
Yes, right.
What do you think of it?
It's very good.
Yeah? What in particular?
I like the chessboard.
Okay, yeah. What about the photography? Because that's new for us. We haven't done photography before. We've been doing it a year. What do you think of it?
It's really good.
Could you see the Photoshop work that they've done?
Yeah.
Especially the one with the horse.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's good, that one, isn't it? Well,
the challenge for us is to make sure that we do not allow the social problems outside our school to dictate what comes in here, rather the other way around. We dictate what happens in here for them to go out into the street and out into their communities to challenge the problems and go into those areas and say, look, no, this is not good enough for us. That you do serve your community, that you are people who are generous, that you give time for the vulnerable, and that you show care to everyone that you meet, and that you're aspirational for yourself and for others.
In the aftermath of the Tottenham riots, there's a lot of really good stuff happened, local communities coming together, and some of our lads performed in public with politicians, with local community leaders, and the way that they have spoken, the way that they've presented themselves, the values that they've come up with, you think, wow, something's working here. And when they say men for others, when they use those Jesuit slogans, men for others, and looking after one another, cura personalis, they actually mean it. That, I think, is pretty impressive.
The Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst, where young men and women train to be army officers. Nicholas Travers, who went to Wimbledon College, a Jesuit school, is halfway through his training here.
I was always encouraged to think about my faith. It's something to fall back on. It keeps you strong, especially here. It can get pretty tough sometimes, and every now and again you need to crawl into that little dark space inside you and find something to pick you up again and give you a bit of strength. And I find my school years were the happiest years of my life, and I can crawl back into that and I can think about what I've been taught.
So many more little intricate aspects that actually dominate your sort of daily life.
What's the toughest part about it?
Failure, probably. People don't tend to be that bad at things before they come here. Everyone's pretty good at most things that they've given a go. So the first time that you actually realise that you're not very good at something, that you've got to work on it, that's always a bit of a kick in the teeth. But then that's something you get used to. That's part of the development process, I think.
It's better to have a strong Christian ethos within the army than it is not to have that. So I think being Catholic and being in the army actually strengthens the army in that respect. And so everyone has to understand what it is they're doing. And that's where you've got to find that moral courage, and that's a really big aspect of life in the army. You've got to have that moral courage of knowing when and what is the right thing to do.
We are sleeping out in these conditions and getting a very different experience to what we'd normally have, which is similar to an experience that a homeless person would have.
Got to see a real homeless person. He expressed how he felt, and it's pretty touching stuff. Oh, I'm definitely not prejudge homeless people, because you don't know what they've been through at all.
The homeless person that we had in talked about the areas in Wimbledon where he sleeps, and those are roads and streets that our boys walk along every day. And you could see it kind of clicking in the boys' heads. Oh, I walk down that street. I've probably walked past this man and I've never seen.
It suddenly taught me not to judge straight away and to think twice before assuming I know what they're going through and what they've been through.
We hope that the experience and the built-in reflection we offer gives an opportunity for them to respond in some way. We hope it elicits some action in them. We hope it elicits some of the creativity out of them to want to act and be agents of change, be men and women for others in various ways.
There is that real, lived out, talked about Catholic faith that's alive in the college, and the boys know it as part of their day-to-day life. It's not added on, it's fundamental to what goes on in the college.
I think one of the problems with education in this country at the moment is that we don't really know what it's for. It gets instrumentalised, grades, results, league tables. But we've got to ask the question of, well, what are we educating people for? What do we want people to do with this education? And I think combined with that is that we don't really have a clear vision collectively as a society of what it means to be a good human being. We don't have a vision of the human person. Now in a Jesuit school, we do have a vision of the human person because that comes from Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ shows us what it is like to be fully alive and fully human. The purpose of the Jesuit education is to develop those gifts, to get to know God, to be men and women for others. We hope that people are going to change the world, or change just a very small part of it.
And our exams are just coming to an end, so the last public exam is today.
That looks scary to me.
I think it's scary for them as well.
For me, the acid test of Jesuit education will be in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time. It's in how they live their lives, how they work in the real world, and what kind of person that they are.
The Jesuit schools in Britain have given much thought to the sort of young people they're trying to form. This Jesuit pupil profile articulates the qualities and virtues the schools are trying to cultivate in each child. A good education is about living well and learning well. These are the two strands which make up the DNA of Jesuit education.
We will get to know your child, we will get to know what their strengths and what their areas for development are, we'll get to know what their hopes and fears are, and hopefully fulfil all the potential, not just academic, but their spiritual potential, their sporting potential, their music, artistic, all of those different things. But they will know it's not just for themselves they're doing it, they will know that they have a responsibility to go out and then share those talents with the rest of the people.
The Jesuit schools in the UK form part of a wider network of Jesuit education worldwide, and each school has close ties and exchange programs working with sister schools in developing countries.
The opportunities to develop men of conscience and compassion who care about other people, welcoming those people from Zimbabwe, wanting to learn about what life is like for them. Because once you have that starting point, you've got children who don't just tomorrow want to raise money, but they want to raise money going into the future, and they want to live parts of their life, if not their whole life, in service of those people.
Jesuit schools today are part of a tradition that stretches back 450 years and reaches out across the globe. St. Ignatius wrote that the aim of a Jesuit school was to live and learn for the greater glory of God and for the common good. This is the spirit of Jesuit education that still inspires today.
Success in the academics, in the sport, in the music, the drama is wonderful, but it's a byproduct, because the purpose of a Jesuit school is to make the most of yourself, so that when you come to make a difference, you'll make the biggest difference you can make.
supposed to